Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, for the last generation,
I made
you
them
have
on
a choice.
show.com, the Republican
I
candidate
did
for
not
governor.
have sexual relations with
I
that
realize that this is something he is
Influence.
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Good morning. Welcome to Backfire. Steve is sitting on the dock of the bay, and so you got Daniel here with John and Franklin. Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, sorry, we tried to hide John's microphone from him. It did not work. You win some, you lose some. All right. Well, it looks like the death row property has been rezoned. Unanimous agreement among the city council. That was quite a switch from 4 to 3.
Well, once there's a majority, I suppose it does not matter.
Well, I don't know, Franklin. That's a little interesting because a lot of times some of the councilmen know that the majority's already there, and then they play the politics of, oh, well, I'll vote the other way to satisfy.
Well, this was second reading, so the first time they had all stated positions and it had passed by one vote. But I guess when everybody showed up for the meeting, it didn't make a whole lot of difference.
I know there's a resident, Ken Kirkpatrick, quoted in the article on the banner talking about Lee University having plans for other properties, and so that was his hesitation. I don't know if that's what was keeping other people.
It is part
like
of the question about it. The core group of people who live in the Historic Neighborhood Association area are concerned about that area retaining its neighborhood characteristic. In other words, it being a residential area. And so they are concerned about additional expansion from Lee changing that characteristic.
You know, that's an interesting conversation because on the one hand, Lee doesn't do anything poorly. It doesn't degrade, and
they haven't suggested otherwise.
Everything they do is really, really nice and actually mostly upgrades structures. But at the same time, it's not a residential use, and it does, even though it doesn't impact the quality of the neighborhood, it does impact the texture of the neighborhood.
Sure, yeah. It's a perfectly.
Both sides are kind of right, to be honest. There's not a wrong side to this.
I think the neighborhood association people acknowledged from the get-go that Lee did a good job with all the projects that they're working on. They just think that there is a point where it ceases to be a neighborhood anymore. If it continues to expand. That's the issue.
Yeah. It's a shame Lee can't get a hold of some other properties buttoned up against Lee and rehab them.
Well, these are properties that butted up against Lee.
Well, I meant other properties that are in shambles that have been in and out of.
Well, they've done a pretty good job of getting rid of a lot of those. They've gone.
The whole area down on Trunk Street, that area down there, Parker, those areas, they bought up tons and tons of houses that are no longer there now. And have been replaced with beautiful structures.
Yeah.
Nobody would suggest otherwise.
When you look at the new street they just finished, you can't really complain about how that looks and what that does for the whole feel for downtown in that area.
Yeah, very nice.
But let me say, if you live in a house with your family and you're on the edge of Lee's property, I can understand being pretty concerned.
Yeah. On the plus side, I guess if you move, you can keep that place and rent it for a pretty penny.
I guess.
Well, Chestnut Grove subdivision has a retaining wall made of railroad ties deteriorating. But they can't do any work on it. They're waiting for word from the state. But if the wall fails, Charlotte Peak says it's going to cost 3 times what it will right now. My question is, why are we paying for, and it's just because of ignorance, why are we paying for a subdivision retaining wall? Do y'all know this backstory behind that?
I'm not familiar with this story.
Okay.
So.
I'm not familiar with it, but I will say that you have to be very careful with those kind of things. When Lisa was a commissioner, there were several instances where things were brought up, and initially it actually looked like the commission was going to do some things. For example, there were some gravel roads and some unfinished roads in neighborhood subdivisions that the contractor didn't do. And so they brought them before the commission, and a time or two, the commission was on the verge of voting to do it, and several of the commissioners, Lisa and Jeff Yarber and some of them, said, look, we don't build roads. We maintain roads, but we don't build roads. And if you start down that road, if you start spending taxpayer money for things that weren't the taxpayer's responsibility, you're opening a big door, because then how do you deny anyone else? You know, there are a lot of subdivisions where not everything was done like it should have been. Is the taxpayer going to foot the bill for that? And if they did, what would stop developers from just not finishing things and saying, I'll just leave this and I'll let the taxpayer pay for it? Yeah. So there's some real problems with, you know, but on the other hand, these commissioners are just beat over the head by, look, this is terrible and it shouldn't be that way. And it's right, it is terrible, it shouldn't be that way. But you still fall back on whose responsibility is it, and do the taxpayers really want to assume that mantle of responsibility?
Yeah. Yeah, it can be tricky, especially if the neighborhood's older, and so the builders are kind of, they're out of there.
Well, there are cases, to be honest, there are cases that are really horrible cases, and people really are suffering. But the developer went bankrupt and moved on.
Yeah.
And the problem is not that development. You know, if the county could go in and just say, this is a horrible case, we're going to take care of this, that'd be fine. But it sets a precedent for every other case.
Yeah, everybody starts lining up. Yeah, and I've got some work on my house I need done too. But on another note, this one might get y'all more excited, but maybe you're just worn down on it. I don't know. They voted to allow 5 liquor stores in Cleveland.
5? I thought we were talking about like 2 or 3.
Well,
No, the last proposal was unlimited and let the market sort it out.
Yeah, and that's where Tom Cassidy stood during the meeting. Bill Estes disagreed. Thought that we needed to have a cap of some sort.
Here's the problem. And this was my argument back when we were selling beer and we were talking about liquor by the drink. And I don't, to be honest, don't drink hardly at all. So it doesn't bother me. But this idea that you're going to have a little bit but not a lot is ridiculous. Your line to draw in the sand was, are we going to have package stores or not? Because one package store, as far as the cultural damage, is enough. So one's no worse than 5 or 6 or 7.
Well, it is interesting because of all the restrictions that they passed at the same time. That was likely to limit the number of people who could have done it anyway. And so it is interesting that they went ahead and put that cap on there.
As far as restrictions,
it's 3,000 square feet, something like that. Got to be brick or stucco building.
Yep.
I think it has to be a standalone building.
It has to be standalone, yeah.
I'm going to fall back to what I said, though. When you put standards like that in place, what you're admitting is that liquor stores do have the potential to damage the community. Yeah. And what bothers me is nobody wanted to have that discussion before we took a vote. Everybody went, oh, it's going to be roses and, just wonderful. We're going to get all this tax dollars. That'll be the next thing. Let's wait a year and see if anybody brags on the tax dollars that this generates, because it's not going to generate very much.
Well, I hope so. But, it has to be its own building, and it has to operate within highway commercial zoning. Can't be part of a planned development. Can't be in a neighborhood, any of that stuff.
Yeah, but even some of that stuff was, to be honest, kind of shady. Like it's 150 feet from a church.
Well, then, not 300 matters, but yeah.
But then you find out it's not 300 feet from property corner to property corner. It's from building corner to building corner.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's literally only 300 feet.
So that could be next door.
Yes, it could be next door.
Yeah.
But they sold, look, we're going to have this restriction of 300 feet. Well, most people consider that property line restrictions. Well, it's not property line, it's buildings.
Yowzas. How far apart are some of those buildings in downtown Cleveland?
Well, some of them share a central wall.
Yeah, but
between each other.
If you go across the street, what is that? Maybe 50
it's probably
feet?
50 feet.
It'd be very difficult to do it downtown, I think, under the restrictions that they have.
Yeah,
but that's okay.
You wouldn't have room for standalone.
That's okay, because that's where all the people that decided we'd have liquor stores spend most of their time, downtown. So they'll be safe. They'll be okay.
I know at least one person who wishes they had voted to only allow one liquor store.
Who's that?
I don't know. He put a bunch of signs up about So the state of the city, Mayor Brooks looked back on 2018, some things that were done, mostly enhancing public safety. He talked about adding in 12 new police officer positions, constructing new fire stations, or maybe I guess these are underway, or plans. 12 new firefighter positions, new school, elementary, changed the repaving cycle from 27.5 to 20-year cycles, and then looking at the future.
And we bought a hotel that's dilapidated and will cost a fortune to do anything with that no one else wanted.
Well, Mayor Brooks did not mention that.
Oh.
Well, it is interesting. Some of those things seem to be growth related. I would assume if they're adding firefighters in particular, that would be a reflection of growth in the community, so that there are more need for additional firefighters. I'd be interested to hear the discussion about the need for more police officers at this point, but given county versus city and so forth.
But when you've got a 43-cent tax increase to spend, you need to do something with it. And at least firemen and policemen are positive additions for the community, unlike a hotel that's fallen down.
I suppose the increase in the repaving cycle would be relatively popular with most folks. I would assume.
That's a population thing too, right? Because you have more cars on the road.
And by the way, Mayor Brooks had nothing to do with buying the hotel. So.
Yeah. He really didn't have anything to do with any of this stuff. He's just kind of looking at the last year, right? Because he came in late.
Review of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking forward to in the future, updating infrastructure, making downtown more vibrant, increasing technology to save resources in the future.
We had Rotary yesterday. We had our legislative delegation there, and it was interesting. Dan Howell is now the chairman of the infrastructure committee in the state. So
in theory, that should be a good person to have.
Yeah. Very good.
And they've also announced they've got some new industry coming in, pretty substantial. I think 1,000 new jobs at Volkswagen. Both of Mike and all three of them, Mike and Dan and Mark Hall, kind of intimated that several suppliers were now looking at our industrial site on the south end for some plants. And I've talked about this before. If all you get are the workers from the industrial development, if one county gets the industrial development and the neighboring county gets the workers, the neighboring county loses, because increased people living in your county costs you money. Industrial development makes you money, so you have to have a good mix. So I hope we are going to get some of the auxiliary businesses locating in Bradley County for VW.
And they're looking at doing electric cars here. Is that correct?
That's right.
I think so.
Is there a risk of increased environmental damage when you're...
The batteries are very toxic.
Will those be made in China? Are they made here? Or,
I have no idea.
Hard to say. I mean, the Tesla operation, the biggest part of that is they have the world's largest battery plant now. Whether they're going to expand those out to provide them for other manufacturers or not, it's hard to say. Chinese are working very diligently on their own competing electric vehicles right now. It's clearly the wave that's coming.
I don't think VW
is announcing a partnership with Ford to develop.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think they're going in with the Chinese.
No, they're not. But I'm saying right now that's the wave that's taking place right now. It is interesting, and the president's been somewhat hostile toward the industry the last 6 months in his comments, saying that it's nonsense that's going to be the dominant part of the car industry. But it really does look to me like that's the direction that we're headed over a 10 to 15 year period. I don't think the
president's being negative. I think what he's being is pragmatic about it. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says that her plan is to transfer 100% to electric in 10 years. And I think that's really what the president's responding to. It's not reasonable to say this is going to happen in 10 years. Is it going to happen in 30 years or 50 years? Probably so, but not in 10 years. That's the problem. It's the time frame that he's commenting on.
Well, hopefully I'll still have my 2005 pickup by then, so I won't have to.
Well, I'm enough of a I guess, doomsday scenario that I'm going to keep the gas engine car in the barn at least.
Are you going to stockpile gas in your barn also?
It's hard to keep gas, but I'll, either that or I'll figure out how to make my own.
The president said that automakers who go all electric will fail.
Well, he means that. They will fail. You can't do it right now.
This wasn't a discussion about whether it gets done in 10 years or 15 or 20. It was, he says, it won't work.
Well, Franklin, this is what's so bad about you all and your hatred of the president. He makes a statement like that anybody with common sense knows there's a time frame to that statement. He doesn't mean, by the way, Franklin, do you think he doesn't mean that in the next 1,000 years?
I don't know what he means.
5,000 years?
I only listen to his words.
Criticize it even though you don't know what he means. Any little chink in the armor that you can use to criticize him, he's obviously talking about anybody that piles into it over the top. Right now, the market's not there, and the market's not there.
The market is rapidly expanding.
How'd the Volt do? How'd the Chevy Volt do?
Well, it wasn't a very good implementation.
Because the market's not there either.
What was the largest selling luxury vehicle last year? What was it?
It's a Toyota.
No, it was a Tesla.
Tesla.
Actually.
Well, folks, let me explain what the president's doing. Now, here's Franklin bragging on the Tesla.
I'm not bragging on anything. It's a number.
Tesla's, I'm sure, a good product. But here's the president, more in line with most of you all out there listening. The Tesla's base sedan is $106,000.
No, John, it's not. That's the problem. The largest selling vehicle was their $45,000 one.
$45,000's a lot of money, Franklin.
I didn't say that. I said luxury vehicle, didn't I?
Okay.
Okay? I
well,
did
that
say
doesn't help regular people going to work.
Yes, but the next step in that is their $35,000 car, which is in line with what people are paying.
Well, the problem here, Franklin, is the government under people like Ocasio-Cortez will tell the people they have to buy the $45,000 car. Just like we had to buy the CPL lights. Everybody liked a damn 40-cent light bulb. But the government, with Al Gore in charge, came in and said, you know what? You all aren't going to be able to buy a 40-cent light bulb anymore. We're going to make you buy a $4 light bulb.
The government,
and by the way,
never, ever do anything for the long-term
CBS
benefit of the
News
country.
is going to support us in that declaration that you're going to buy that light bulb because they're owned by GE, who produces the $4 light bulb.
Nobody. The government should never, ever do anything that's unpopular if it's for the long-term benefit of the country.
According to who? Long-term benefit according to who? That's always the problem, Franklin. You people always think you know more than the regular people living in the country know. A market decides these things the way the market wants to. But that's not good for central control liberal Democrats.
Well, John, I believe at Rotary last week you heard from Dewey Woody talking about tips.
Rotary.
Oh, wrong Rotary. Well, Dewey
Rotaries.
Woody last week talked about the need to be aware of your surroundings in an age of mass shootings. What are some good tips for people to do that as they go about their daily lives?
So this is just a topic out of the blue that Franklin and I are going to talk about now.
Yes, it is. Thank you. This is Backfire. Whoop FM.
Okay.
We don't know what we're doing.
All right.
If you see someone walking into a school with a gun, call the police.
But don't call Scott Israel, the sheriff of Broward County, or any of his deputies. Look, I've said this for years. Actually, I think it was Esquire magazine, but several years ago I read an article, and they did a study on people's body frame and how you carried yourself and how you walked. And they found that if you walked timidly and you had sort of a scared nature and shoulders slumped over, you were more likely to be mugged. But by the same token, if you walked cocky and by God, I'll take the world on, you were more likely to be mugged because it presented a challenge. They said the person that walked briskly with purpose, was turning their head and looking around and paying attention to what was going on, that was the least likely person to be mugged. And so I've always told my daughter and my son, look, pay attention to what's going on. Don't be so absorbed in your conversation or certainly in your cell phone. Lord, we got people on cell phones walking out in front of cars, much less not paying attention to the mugger or the attacker that's lurking around. So just being confident, being aware, and acting like you know what you're doing and you've got somewhere to be, somewhere to go, makes a huge difference in that.
Confident, but not overconfident, like you want to
challenging.
Be. Yeah. Well, saw an article that 3 officers have been shot in the U.S. in less than a week. I had one in was it Atlanta? One in Birmingham, Alabama, one in Louisiana, and one in California.
I think last year was a record high for police officers being shot.
What is, I mean, I know that they're in the line of duty. It's always dangerous, but I mean, one of them just got, 2 of them actually just got shot for being officers. They weren't doing anything.
Well, I believe if you go back in our radio archives, you'll hear me saying you can't put forward the kinds of concepts and ideas that a lot of the people in our political realm, and I'll say mostly on the liberal side of the coin, you can't put those things forward and not have it have an impact. And this is what I said would happen.
Franklin, what do you think is going on with the shootings of officers?
Officers who work in high crime areas encounter obscene amounts of firearms. By the thousands.
Every
and
state
thousands.
that passed concealed carry laws saw decreases in their crime. Decreases. California is one of the worst areas for this, and it's the strictest gun control laws in the country. Strictest gun control laws in the country.
Okay.
Tons of crime.
Does that make...
That makes way too much common sense. Franklin's probably not following that.
Oh, I understand it. I just understand the ludicrousy of the notion that we're in a society that has something like 4.5 guns per citizen, and nobody understands that leads to more shootings.
There are 350,000 legally owned full automatic machine guns in the United States of America. Not a single one has ever been used in the commission of a crime.
How many of them?
350,000.
That's because those are all registered, aren't they?
Not a single one has been. They're owned. They're legally.
They're all
owned.
registered, aren't
yeah,
they?
Yeah, they are registered.
Well, then let's register all of them. What do you think about that?
Because there's a little thing called the Second Amendment, Franklin.
What does that have to do with registering?
I know you're because.
What does that say? That means
you know what? The Weimar Republic said the same thing right before they confiscated everybody's guns.
Your analogy was stupid.
No, it's not, Franklin.
Oh, there's machine guns out there.
No, Franklin.
They're all registered.
Let me see if I can.
We all know where they are.
Let me see if I can let you follow the logic here. You made the comment that there were 400 million guns in the country, and so obviously that must mean it leads to more crime. Obviously, that leads to more crime. I simply counted with there's 350,000 machine guns. Not a single one has. You know, Franklin, how in the world can you go from your own Democrat people going, the police are the problem, the police are corrupt, the police? Yes, you did. Absolutely, is what they said.
That's just another lie you guys forged.
You mean like the hands up, don't shoot that all of your people supported that turned out to be a complete lie? And I said at the time, Franklin, you keep promoting this kind of thought, and you were going to get police officers killed. And that's what we're getting. And you just don't want to own up to the fact that what I told you was going to happen is happening.
What I don't own up to is your insistence on having inane positions that nobody could rationally believe. It's just a series of myths.
You mean like the suicide myth? Like Japan, who has virtually no ownership of gun, but they have the highest suicide rate in the world? That? Or you mean like Sweden, which has the highest gun ownership in the world, and they have one of the lowest crime rates?
Here's what we know for sure. Without any dispute whatsoever, the vast majority of suicides in America are with guns.
But that's
why do they choose guns?
They chose to kill themselves,
why
Franklin.
Why do they choose
and if
guns,
they didn't have a gun, well,
why?
I don't know, Franklin.
Because it's more efficient.
Well, the Japanese seem to be pretty good at it without guns. That's the point. So what happens here, folks, is people like Franklin and the liberal Democrats, the socialists at this point, they only look for a fact to enable them to exact control over your life. And that's all this is about. So when you bring up, by the way, Japan has a higher suicide rate and they don't have any guns, they don't care about that. Then the logic of that would be that there's a problem with people's attitudes. There's a problem with suicide. There's a problem with depression. But that's not where they go because they can't control you with that. They go to let me take your guns away from you.
John's party would be the person who cuts the most funding for dealing with that too. So I love his theory that the market works, but the truth is they think people are a market, and by God, let the market sort out whether they live or die.
Let me address that.
That's exactly what he thinks. That's what his party thinks.
Franklin, I'm not even going to argue with you. Let's say that's true, which it's not, but let's say it's true that we want to cut funding. The difference is, Franklin, cutting funding doesn't control anybody's life. Everything about you all is about control. And like I said, the Weimar Republic.
Just go on down to the OK Corral and sort it out, John.
Well, it worked okay.
That's right. That's right. Except for the bystanders who get killed in the process.
Right. So did you hear what he just did, folks? He's more concerned about the bystanders, which almost never happens, than the actual police officers that have been killed on a weekly basis in our country.
There were 985 police officers shot last year in America. That's the truth.
Say that number again?
985.
I think that's a record.
No, the year before there were 1,000.
Oh,
All right. All right. That's a terrible thing. All right. Nobody would suggest that's a good thing. That's a terrible thing. But that pales in comparison to the number of other gun shootings that happen in America on a daily basis.
More people overdose than shoot themselves. More people are overdosed. We had a program on it just yesterday. There are more overdoses in this country than there are gun deaths. There are vastly more automobile deaths. There are actually, as far as these assault rifles that you all are going after, there are more medical deaths at the hands of surgeons than there are assault rifle deaths.
Well, since we landed here, there is a new stat on opioid deaths where you are more likely in your life to die of an opioid overdose than a car accident. It overtook it recently. Lifetime odds of dying from an overdose are now 1 in 96. That's opioid specific.
More than car deaths. Yeah.
Car deaths are 1 in 103.
Which are more than gun deaths.
And incidentally, just the last year that we have the full statistics for, 2013, there were, let's see, 33,636 deaths due to injury by firearms.
And how many were suicide? Over 60%. Over 2/3 were suicides.
Right. And there were 73,505 non-fatal firearm injuries that year. So a total of 105,000 people shot.
More people are poisoned than are shot. More people. There are hands and feet kill more people. Significantly more people than long rifles do. Now, pistols jumps on up there, but knives are actually about 3 times more than hands and feet. Rifles account for less than 2% of all murders. Hands and feet account for about 6%. Knives are over 15%. So if we've got an assault rifle problem, we've really got a knife problem. But by the way, the idiots over in Great Britain actually have put laws against knives because once they outlawed guns, people started killing each other with knives. The assault rate actually went up in Great Britain after they banned the guns.
Well, as a moderator, I don't have an opinion on this kind of stuff, but
I'm sure people feel much better if
well, now that's very unbackfirely of you.
Well, I was going to say, but I think, a friend thinks that one of the points that guns have is the defensive uses, the numbers on there, which are hard to
the Clinton administration did a study, and they designed the study to minimize the number. So let's say that you own a liquor store and you make a nightly deposit and you carry a gun and 3 times in that year you're attacked and you defend yourself with that gun. They only counted that as 1 incident. So instead of it being 3, it was only 1 because you were the same person, even though it happened 3 times to you. But even under those rules, they found 2.5 million crimes are prevented by the use of guns every year. 2.5 million. The estimates, if you were actually being fair, are up to 5 or 6 million.
Well, again, that wasn't my opinion. That was, I don't have one. I'm a nonpartisan moderator, just like Steve Doball Hickson.
Here's an interesting one.
Yes.
Less than 10% of non-gun suicide attempts are successful. Gun suicide attempts are over 85% successful.
Well, how are they so much better at it in Japan, Franklin? You know, that's what kills me about you all. Why don't we deal with people's attitudes about suicide? Oh, but I forgot. Your side of the coin is wanting it to make it legal, euthanasia. Canada's already legalized it down to age 17, and they're discussing how young children under 17 should be able to commit suicide by assistance without their parents' permission. That's going on just north of our border.
Well,
Denmark brags on the fact that they've gotten rid of all Down syndrome. Well, hell, they just killed all of them. So we got euthanasia going on all around the world in the liberal side of the spectrum, but we're worried about people using a gun.
well, during the break, which we're about to take, we'll do research and see what the success rate of suicide is in Japan, sans gun. Until then,
100% for everybody that dies.
that is correct. But we'll see, you know, because that is interesting. 1 out of 10 without a gun. We will be back in just a moment.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
And you're listening to WOOPLP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Yeah, you looking for something sweet? I know you are. Bring your little sweet self to the Village Bake Shop. Around since 1961, there ain't a baked good in the galaxy the Village Bake Shop can't whip up for you. So when you're ready to treat your mouth to a taste you won't soon forget, get over to the Village Bake Shop in the Village Green Town Center, or give them a call at 476-5179. You dig?
We're here at the Trane Heating and Air Conditioning Testing Facility to see how unstoppable their products really are.
Inside this climate chamber, it's raining incredibly hard on this Trane ECU unit. Clearly, it's hard to stop the train.
Ready for a heating and air unit that's been tested in the harshest environments possible? Stop thinking about the other guys and get a Trane. Call Mechanical Systems today to get your home on the road to comfort. 336-5739.
Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Matthews Pool and Spa Company, located in Cleveland, Bradley County for over 45 years. You know them. They're your new swimming pool construction and supply company in Cleveland, Tennessee, now with 4 generations of Matthews to serve you. Matthews Pool and Spa Company, for over 45 years, your swimming pool construction and supply company, spa or hot tub installation and maintenance. Get all of your supplies for your pool or spa right now. That's the new location in the old Quinn Electric Company building behind KFC at 2724 Key Street in Cleveland. Call Matthews now, 476-4521. You better get your order in now for your new pool construction for this spring and summer. 476-4521. Matthews Pool and Spa Company. Gonna jump in. Woo! Attention, Cleveland area creditors. Are you tired of dealing with debtors that owe you money? I'm Jeff Renfro, and I've owned and operated Financial Recovery, a debt recovery specialist here in my hometown of Cleveland for 18 years. We're a licensed and bonded Tennessee collection agency working for a wide variety of creditors, from commercial, manufacturing, physicians, dentists, attorneys, small business owners, to individuals. Look, any kind of business dealing with billing, charge accounts, or even return checks. I know your past due accounts are not a top priority for you, but they would be to me. Let me try to make it easy for you to make a change in the way you've been handling your accounts. There's no contract and no cost to you in most cases, as our fee of only 30% can be added to the balance owed to you. So, whether you have hundreds of accounts monthly and need help with your billing and collection, or you're just an individual and somebody owes you money, let me help you. Give me a call at 400-5376 and I'll come by and see you. That's 400-5376.
Financial Recovery, a licensed and bonded collection agency in Cleveland, Tennessee, 400-5376.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
Every Saturday. That's right. Every Saturday.
from 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239. Or go see him
Every Saturday.
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933. 961-7239.
No dealers allowed.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, we are back to Backfire, the angriest show on radio. Daniel Brantley here in place of Steve.
We've just been reprimanded by a part of our loyal audience, advised us that online we look angry at each other.
Well, they're going to shake hands the rest of the show until one of them hurts the other. Ooh, you should take left hands because then you can squeeze the ring, you know.
Okay.
Well, we tried to figure out Japanese suicide issues as far as failure success rates, like Franklin had for the U.S. on non-gun related things. We could not find those numbers.
But they don't use guns there, but they still kill it themselves.
Yeah, we were looking for without gun what the...
Well, I'm thinking that stabbing about a 14-inch samurai blade into your gut and twisting it around is fairly effective.
Well, and Franklin said, you know, one of the reasons that their numbers are so high is because the culture that they live in.
But I commented back that that's exactly the kind of conversation we should be having here. Yeah. We should be discussing why people feel drawn towards taking their own life rather than talking about what tool they use to do it.
Yeah. Well, the government is shut down. Where are we in there? What's it going to take to...
Is the government shut down? I didn't know.
Parts of it are.
We were going through the airport in Atlanta yesterday. It was shut down.
It's brutal, yeah. Mm-hmm. So what needs to happen for us to move past this? Is there going to be any compromise? Anybody going to be shaking hands like you guys are right now? If you're watching online, you can see John Franklin shake hands for the next 30 minutes. Will we have any of that to stop the
shutdown? The president asked everybody to come to the White House, and he was going to have a conversation about how they could work it out. Not a single Democrat showed up.
Well, they went, a week and a half ago, and the president said, if you're not going to do what I want, I'm leaving and left.
Actually, that's not true. Let me tell you what happened. He asked he said, now listen to this, folks. He said, if I give you what you want and we open the government back up, in 30 days, can we talk about the border wall? And Nancy Pelosi said, absolutely not. And at that point, the president said, well, there's no reason to talk to you then. So, Franklin, do you not find her position to be somewhat of an unreasonable rejection?
I find the president's position to be baffling.
Did he say to her, if I give you what you want and we open the government back up, in 30 days, can we talk about what I want? Did he say that?
Actually, he wanted a commitment from them.
And she said, absolutely
more than
not.
Just talking.
She's actually said, I'm not ever going to give you the wall, even though she's voted for $8 billion to give to Obama for a wall.
What I know is that, according to all the polls that have come out in the last few days, the support for the president's position is crumbling.
Actually, support for the wall is going up. He is getting blamed because he asked for the blame.
But more than 50% of the people still oppose the wall.
The wall is going up, Franklin, and the Border Patrol says you have to have the wall. They arrested 2,500 caravan migrants for illegal crossings.
Actually, what they said is, and this is where the debate gets off track, is that there are portions of the border where it would be helpful.
All right.
But that's not what the president wants to talk about.
CNN calls their affiliate in San Diego and says, we want you to do a program for us. And so the KUSI explains to them that, hey, the wall works here in San Diego. So you know what CNN did? Refused to run the story. So this is FBI tables. Property crimes in El Paso, where they have a wall, have plunged more than 37% from their peak, pre-fence peak. They've gone from 12,000 down to from 19,000 down to 12,000. Violent crimes have dropped more than 6% a year since they put up their wall. Additionally, marijuana and cocaine coming in through the city in El Paso has been cut in half. All told, empirical evidence shows everywhere we've got the wall, San Diego, El Paso, they've seen a decrease in violent crime and a decrease in drugs coming over the border. Obama's own Border Patrol chief said he supported Trump and the wall.
The facts are that...
Do you dispute the El Paso facts I just gave you?
The facts are that border crossings are at a 45-year low.
Franklin,
45 years.
Violent crime went down. Do you care about violent crime?
Violent crime's down everywhere, John.
Everywhere. Property crimes in El Paso dropped 37% after the wall was built.
Guess
Franklin.
what?
37%. Did the country see
all
a
those
37% decrease?
Towns and stuff through there, if you poll their residents, they're not for it.
Franklin, 37% drop from one year to the next when they put a wall up. The San Diego...
The facts are that more people are leaving the country than coming in now.
San Diego Border Patrol.
Yet this is a crisis.
Chief agent in San Diego said, quote, "We could not make a measurable impact on the flow of undocumented immigrants across the border. It wasn't until we installed barriers along the border that gave us the upper hand that we started to get control. In areas where he has two levels of fencing, he achieves 90% operational control."
As I said, John, the security officials along the border say that there are places where it would be helpful. There are also places where it's a total waste of money.
Nancy Pelosi says they're immoral, Franklin. Does that mean she supports tearing down the wall where it's already been built?
Because if you do it in terms of all the bigoted statements the president has made, yes, it raises moral concerns.
Well, I guess she was real worried while she was on the beach in Hawaii and the shutdown was going on, right? Or maybe she was worried while she was on this political junket that 37 of them just took to Puerto Rico while the government shut down, where they got to see Hamilton and they got to party with the Hamilton cast, all paid for by we don't know who.
Sure.
So they're real worried about the shutdown, aren't they, Franklin?
I don't know if they are or not.
They weren't worried in Puerto Rico on the beach.
I don't know. The president certainly wasn't worried when he said he was going to do it.
When he stopped the raises for his executive office holders and when he stayed home during the entire time?
You mean when he said, "Oh, they just get a vacation day"? Oh, isn't that great?
For those keeping score who aren't able to watch us online, it's amazing to watch them talk about these things with smiles on their faces. But it's happening. And Franklin, you said something that was interesting. You said more people are leaving the country, leaving America?
More immigrants are leaving America than coming in right now.
You're saying
and that's
they're going
been true,
back to their
and that's
home
been
countries?
true for 6 or 7 years now.
Going back to their home countries? Or
because the vast majority of the ones who come from Mexico were only coming here for economic reasons. The economy has improved in Mexico, and so they've been going back.
Well, doesn't that undercut you all's entire argument that they need political asylum?
Actually, it does not, because most of the asylum seekers are not from Mexico.
Frankly,
they're from Central and South America, where they have
asylum wasn't supposed to be asylum wasn't for that.
Well, then
asylum was for persecution.
Change the law, then, John.
Well, he can't change the law because every time he does anything, every time the president does anything that's within his powers, a liberal Obama-appointed judge strikes it down and puts it in the courts, just like they did the citizenship question this week on the census.
Yeah.
Speaking of asylum, and I think I heard the word caravan. There's a new one coming from Honduras.
Yeah, but it's not a problem. You know, who cares about that? Just let them all waltz in.
That's right. Women and children. Oh, my God.
Of course, you know, Nancy Pelosi with her wall around her house and her locked front door.
Of course, you forget that all these, quote, asylum seekers are not streaming across the border. They're coming to border entry points and asking for asylum.
They're not supposed to do that.
They're not coming across illegally at all.
They're supposed to apply for asylum in their own country. They're not even supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. They're supposed to apply for asylum there. But Franklin, tell me why George Soros has a 10-foot wall around his house. Tell me why Nancy Pelosi has a wall around her house. Tell me why Barack Obama has a wall around his house.
In George Soros' case, it would be because the Republican Party has gone to extraordinary lengths to make him a target.
But walls are immoral, Franklin.
Yeah.
And he's the most moral guy around, right?
You say so, John.
Well, that's what you all say. You all care about people.
Actually, Democrats don't talk about George Soros. Only Republicans
they just take his billions of dollars that he pays. Of course, they don't mention him.
Tell us what you think. 614-5553. 614-5553.
That Obama had a 10-foot wall around his house. They weren't able to fact check. You know why? Because he couldn't get through the first of 3 barriers before you even get to the wall.
They did, however, interview his neighbors who said it wasn't true.
Franklin, he has barriers, multiple layers of barriers.
Yes, John, because the president, the former president
Nancy
of the United
Pelosi
States.
does too.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
She has walls around her multi-million-dollar mansion, which, by the way, Franklin, Dan Crenshaw, newly elected Republican congressman, refused to accept his pay. Nancy Pelosi, who's worth about $125 million, is still drawing her pay. And Ocasio-Cortez, who said it was immoral before she took office for them to be paid during a shutdown, when she's now accepting her pay, and a newsman tried to ask her, she said, "Gotta go, don't have time."
Well, I am fine with any legislation to say that nobody gets paid during a shutdown, John.
Well, Nancy Pelosi's in charge. You all are in charge.
Well, we're in charge of one house for sure.
That's the budgetary house. Sure. Well, everything originates there. Of course, the first thing you all filed was a bill to reestablish U.S. taxpayer funding of abortions overseas. That's one of the first things you all filed.
That's not a budget issue, though.
Yes, it is a budget issue.
No, your pay is withheld until you come back into it. It's not a budget issue. That's Folks, an executive branch issue.
The first thing they filed was to reestablish paying for abortions overseas. Non-U.S. citizens. Abortions being paid for by taxpayers.
Actually, I think it's U.S. citizens.
No, it's not, Franklin. It goes to agencies that provide abortions in foreign countries. Okay. Nothing about American citizens.
Mm-hmm. Before we jump into that too deeply, sorry, my phone's yelling at me. Marco Rubio feared that if Donald Trump considered the wall a national emergency, that could happen with other things, most specifically.
Many Republicans consider it.
Yeah, specifically the one he mentioned was climate change. Is that a fair assessment of things? And is that
look? We've lost complete control over our government. The FBI, New York Times ran a story that the FBI, without any consultation with the Justice Department, opened an investigation into the president because they were concerned about his actions. Now, that in and of itself is a danger, and that's what Marco Rubio is talking about. We are allowing the bureaucratic state with unelected people taking control over our entire country.
Yes, because no one could possibly be concerned that the President of the United States insists on meeting with the head of Russia and kicking all Americans out of the room while he does it. Nobody could worry about that.
Though. That's the point. The President Obama gave billions of dollars back to the leading sponsor of state terrorism in the world. A lot of people like me were worried about that, but I still wouldn't say the FBI, in and on its would volition, without any consultation with the IG or with the Attorney General, would just start investigating the president.
Nobody could possibly conflate those two issues.
Absolutely, Franklin. $500 billion to the states, the country's world's
you can't make
largest
this
state
stuff up.
sponsor of
The president told his translator to give him her notes so he could destroy them.
Franklin,
why? What possible reason could there be, John,
even the liberal media,
for the Russians to know what our president says to it, but the president's own aides can't know?
Even the liberal media has had to admit that President Trump has been harder on Russia than Obama was. Harder on Russia than Obama was. Authorized lethal aid to Ukraine.
As the Russians get the main thing they want over and over again.
More people than Obama ever did. He has been harder on Russia than Obama was.
Russians,
has he talked, has he said things that I'd rather he didn't say? Sure. But if you look at his actions, he's been tougher on Russia.
I'm happy to look at his actions, John. His actions in undermining the Western alliances that have kept us safe and secure and prosperous for 70 years.
And pay their 2%?
Actually, they were keeping their word.
No, they're not keeping their word. They're moving closer to keeping their word.
Under an agreement
and they're moving, yes, that he negotiated.
No,
after criticizing
there was an agreement to do that.
None of them had met their agreement.
You have got to get grounded in fact at some point. I mean, if Barack Obama did 1/10 of the things that he did, he wouldn't be calling for his impeachment. He'd be calling for him to be shot by a firing
squad. The Trump administration's treatment of Russia has been much harsher than Obama's. The New York Times had to admit that.
What he wants
the New York
right
Times
now.
even admitted
He's
that, Franklin.
getting exactly what he wants right now.
You mean lethal aid to Ukraine? You mean blocking his oligarchs from doing any business? Yeah, Syria, he's getting a little bit of what he wanted in Syria. But President Trump also campaigned. He campaigned on we don't need to be involved. Now, I personally am more of a hawk. I probably do want us more involved. But he campaigned on that, Franklin, and people voted on him for that.
You're about to see the Russians expand their territory.
Your own Democrats spent more in the state of Alabama doing. Your own guys spent more in the state of Alabama than the entire Russian program in 2016. Russia spent $100,000 in the entire nation. Your guys spent $100,000 just in the state of Alabama on a false flag.
You're about to see the Russians start expanding their territory.
Their entire
and the reason they're doing it is because they know,
the state of New York.
Because they know that this president has supported the undermining of the Western alliances, which kept them in check. And that's their long-term goal. And they don't give a crap about a few sanctions.
I understand you right. So President Bush was installing anti-missile batteries in Poland. And the first thing that Barack Obama did was cancel that program, which was exactly what Russia had wanted. Actual missile banks going in, Obama stopped. But that's not a big deal, right? But because Trump authorized lethal aid to Ukraine, blocked their bankers from the markets, has actually taken more steps against them, you still think because he doesn't say the right things that he's more dangerous?
I think that Putin is very crafty and he knows what he wants.
How do you think he took Obama removing the missile batteries from Poland?
His goal
what did Poland
is not
say
what
about
you
that?
think it is.
What did Poland say about that, Franklin? Very upset about that.
Sure.
What about NATO? Very upset about that. That's the first thing Obama did. Did you pitch a fit over that?
There was a debate.
Did you pitch a fit over it? Did you say he was in bed with Putin? No,
Obama
because he was your
wasn't
guy.
privately meeting with Putin.
He didn't have to. He was removing the missile batteries.
Sure, okay, John. Go ask them what they all think.
Well, the Russians?
No.
Well,
all the NATO countries.
Well, let's ask the Russians. What we'll do is we'll call Hillary. She'll call the Steele, and he'll contact all his Russian intelligence people that he got the dossier from. Mm-hmm. That'll be the most direct link to the Russian intelligence factors.
I mean, at some point, you think you guys would start to deal with facts instead of all this speculation.
Well, let me give you a fact.
Well, let's go there. How about this?
Affairs?
Let's not use my opinions about this. Let's go down the president's aides. Rex Tillerson. Remember him?
Yep.
All right. Referred to the president as, quote, an effing moron. John Kelly, his chief of staff, also picked by the president, called him an effing idiot.
No, we don't know that. Kelly denied saying that.
Cohen.
Kelly denied.
Not Michael Cohen.
Oh, you mean the guy that just cut a deal to save his ass?
C-O-H-N, Cohen. Not that Cohen. Called him dumb as, quote, S-H-I-T. Reince Priebus, his first chief of staff. He is an idiot. General H.R. McMaster. He's a dope. All right? Those are the president's
They're all people that had to leave.
Oh my God, John. Because the golden child...
Let me read you.
Couldn't possibly be.
You want some facts? Let me read you.
He was going to hire the best people.
Franklin.
And he was going to listen to the generals. And they think he's an idiot.
So here's the new chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Elliot Engel, Democrat, New York. Okay, you want facts, Franklin? He has now said that he plans to get rid of the subcommittee on terrorism and use those resources to launch a subcommittee on investigating Donald Trump and whether or not he colluded with Russia. Now, we already have multiple investigations going on whether there was collusion, which, by the way, they found absolutely nothing yet. But here's my point, Franklin. the subcommittee on terrorism. He's going to do away with it. You talk about a doofus. He's doing away with the subcommittee on terrorism. So we've got ISIS. We've got all kinds of organizations around the world aiming to destroy us.
John.
And your new chairman is doing away with the subcommittee on terrorism.
There is a federal agency whose job is to do that.
There's a federal agency investigating collusion. Investigating collusion.
And who's running that agency right now, John?
Oh, so you're buying into this the entire government, all of Trump, anything Trump touches.
John, who is running?
Christopher Wray.
No, the federal agency whose job is to target
you mean
terrorism.
DHS?
Huh?
Homeland Security. Which one are you talking about, Frank?
There's a
they all
specific
overlap.
agency. Guess what? We're 2 years into the Trump administration, and the president hasn't nominated anybody to head it up yet.
Franklin, your guy
hasn't even appointed somebody to do the job.
Destroying the Committee on Terrorism in the House. He's doing away with it. So, folks, the Democrats aren't worried about terrorism. They're not worried about terrorists coming across the southern border. They're not worried about oversight. All they want to do is destroy this president. And they don't care what damage they do to the rest of the country. They don't care. That's why Nancy Pelosi went to Hawaii during the shutdown. That's why they went to Puerto Rico this weekend during the shutdown on a junket paid for by lobbyists.
Well, we're quickly running out of time, but before we do, I understand there's a new survey on related to abortion done by the Knights of Columbus, not the Knights of the Round Table.
Knights of Columbus did a survey. They found that 75% of Americans believe abortion should be restricted to, at most, the first 3 months of pregnancy. That's 12 weeks. We've got judges striking down 24 weeks. But 75% of the American public thinks it should be 12 weeks, which, by the way, liberal Europe, 12 weeks.
So the take from that is the vast majority of Americans think there should be a limited right to abortion in America with some restrictions. Would you agree that that's the take from that?
Well, there's actually a lot.
Wouldn't that be the reasonable interpretation?
Let me read you the rest of it, Franklin.
I think that would, in fact, be what most people think.
55% describe themselves as pro-life. Pro-choice. Pro-life 38%, but because of the 75%, what they determined was pro-life and pro-choice really don't tell you a whole lot. 60% of Democrats and 78% of independents favor limiting it to 3 months.
Okay.
60% of Democrats, Franklin.
Okay.
75% overall.
John, I think that's an accurate statement of what most people believe.
65% of Americans would favor the court either ruling to allow abortion restrictions to be decided by each state, 49% of that, 65%, or ruling to outlaw abortion completely, 16%. 54% of Americans oppose the use of taxpayer funds for abortion in general. 62% oppose abortions in cases of Down syndrome. What this tells you is that the court, this is the same thing with the Obergefell decision on gay marriage. Most people think the states should be allowed to decide these things. And when you allow the states to decide it, to be honest, the way gay marriage was going, the proponents of gay marriage were winning on a state-by-state level. But when the federal government, through the Supreme Court, makes a ruling, you create division, you create resentment. If you allow it to be decided, like the vast majority of people in this poll say they want it decided, people are comfortable with that. And you know what? One state may be different. One state may be 15 weeks. Another state may be 20 weeks. But the people in those states can vote in or out the representatives that do that. So abortion, the pro-choice people have lost that battle. You know, the conservatives lost the gay marriage battle, but the liberals have lost. But guess what? They haven't really lost because the courts keep intervening.
Well, I saw a quick article this morning that after a year of promises and all that kind of jazz, North Korea continues to have gross human
rights violations,
and hasn't really changed. Is it because it's all a show, or
it's because the people in the country?
It's
because the people in the country don't have any way to defend themselves. They were disarmed.
Well, what would it take?
Just
for
like
North
the
Korea
Jewish people in Germany were disarmed before they were exterminated.
So what would it take for North Korea to turn around and actually start
somebody
treating his
needs
people
to
as
kill
people.
Kim Jong. Which is it, Un or Il, or which one is it now?
You got to have somebody in place though that's
Rocket
not going to
Man.
be him, because we have gotten rid of people in the past and put someone we thought would be
I would
better.
actually encourage. Here's a book recommendation for you. This is not a partisan book. This is about a lady who grew up in North Korea and escaped in her 20s. It's called The Girl with Seven Names. And it's a really fascinating picture of what growing up there was actually like and what they would have to overcome to change that society. And she lives in the West now. And if you want to have some better understanding of the situation, I'd say definitely read that.
Well, gents, any closing words? Because that takes care of our time.
Well, John and I will be in the courtyard of the Village Green down here doing Kumbaya. Shortly
Hey, but
after
I do want y'all to know though, the Washington Post was really on top of things this week. They fact-checked how many hamburgers the president provided for Clemson's football team. Literally wrote a story on whether there was a mile-high stack of hamburgers that he said. He said a mile of stack of hamburgers, and they literally wrote a story, and they estimated how tall the hamburgers were and how many it would take to be a mile high. That's how crazy the Democrats are. By the way, there wasn't actually a mile high. So guess what? President Trump lied.
Actually, his original tweet was that he bought 1,000 hamburgers, which is what led them to
The
be
story
fact-checking.
actually said the McDonald's hamburgers are easier to count because the boxes let you know. The Wendy's are wrapped up harder to tell. They literally did an investigative report on how many hamburgers he bought.
The president actually got mocked by Burger King.
And by the way, they
Burger
also
King
said that
is
he
making
was a
fun of the
sexist
president.
because he made a side comment that was better than having Melania make them all salads. And so that made him a raving sexist for assuming that Melania would have to make the salads.
And on that note, that smiling, happy note, we say farewell. Until next week, Backfire listeners.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin